sites. And so if you prefer to remain anonymous and not share your image, then I would suggest disabling your video. So just a quick reminder for that. And so Salt Lake Thrive, so as the name indicates, we are based in Salt Lake City, Utah, and started the group, oh gosh, back in 2017, and coming up fast on 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years. And so Salt Lake Thrive is a local community group. We're associated with a nonprofit, Plant Pure Communities. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but Plant Pure Communities is basically a nonprofit group, and they support, really, it's exciting, an international grassroots network of groups like Thrive. So Thrive is an independent member of Plant Pure Communities, which grew out of an effort, oh my goodness, back in 2014-15, another grassroots network effort to help raise awareness of the many benefits of plant-rich nutrition and the whole experience. A lot of just things cascaded out of that effort, and it culminated in a documentary I highly recommend called Plant Pure Nation. So I believe you can find that on YouTube, and I can include the link because I'll email everybody a link to this recording. So I'll include that link. And last time I looked, the video was on YouTube and then also on the plantpurenation.com website. So just a very inspirational story, and I highly recommend that. It gives the background to Plant Pure Communities and how groups like Thrive came into being. So that's a little bit of the background. So I'm very excited today. So some of you may or may not be aware, this is Heart Health Awareness Month in February. And I'm very excited, and I don't know how many of you know that heart disease is the #1 killer of, Dr. Reddy can correct me. I mean, may have been some weeks with COVID where heart disease and COVID kind of played tag team, so to speak, where COVID may have been responsible for more, but typically until COVID, heart disease has been the #1 killer of men and women in the US, and perhaps other countries, unfortunately, have adopted the standard American diet or the SAD diet. So certainly very, very interesting. I think we probably all know someone who's been impacted by heart disease to one extent or another, and maybe many of us are experiencing issues with our heart health, and that's why we are so excited to have the opportunity to listen to and ask, not only listen to Dr. Reddy, and based on his vast experience and what have you, but also to ask him questions as well. So I know Dr. Reddy can give you far more information on his background than I can, but I'll just start real quickly. He's the Director of Interventional Cardiology at the Veterans Administration, the James A. Haley Veterans Administration in Tampa, Florida. And I know Dr. Reddy, one reason I'm excited to have him with us today, because I know he is so dedicated. It's much more than a job to him. As you'll see, his passion will come through. And we were chatting a few minutes ago, and some of you may have been with us, but I know Dr. Reddy spends a great deal of his free time doing events like this on the weekend. I think multiple events on the weekends and sometimes on the weeknights, sharing this experience and sharing his information, because it is so important, because so many people don't know. So many people think because of our family history, gosh, my uncles had heart disease, my father did, and my mother did. So it's inevitable. I'm going to have heart disease, and I'm going to have a heart attack. Or that it's just an inevitable aspect of getting older. Gosh, it's just natural. Once you get in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, you're going to have high blood pressure. You're going to have high cholesterol. And I think part of the message that Dr. Reddy will be sharing today is that that's not always necessarily true. It's not always inevitable that our genes are as a result that we are going to experience heart disease. I know he's going to share very, very pragmatic, practical, and important information about strategies that we can maintain or sometimes improve our heart health, and which we in turn can share with our friends and family. So without further ado, and so Dr. Reddy, I think he prefers, you can correct me if you're wrong, Dr. Reddy, he's going to have a presentation, a talk, and then we can take questions at the end. Is that how you prefer to do it, Dr. Reddy, take questions at the end of your presentation?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Just we have folks from Canada, certainly Donna, who's joined us. This is your 3rd or 4th event, Donna from Ontario, Kingdom. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Reddy. And you can type your messages in the chat so you can remember, and we'll have those to refer to at the end of Dr. Reddy's presentation. All right, thank you, Dr. Reddy.
Thank you, Harriet, for this kind words of introduction. And yeah, I'm impressed by the work that you are all doing in Salt Lake City. You know what? Before I go further, it's just a quick housekeeping, if I may. Politely request attendees to mute your mic, so there's no that way people can hear the presentation. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, there was some background noise, so I just want to be in the interest of everybody's time. So yes, thanks again for asking me to do this presentation. I appreciate the opportunity. So like I have no disclosures whatsoever. I Harriet said, I work for the VA, and that's the only job I've ever done as a cardiologist. So for all practical purposes, I'm a public servant. I do this on weekends as a matter of labor of love. I have no financial conflicts of interest or any conflicts of interest of any sort. So in terms of my story, I'm an interventional cardiologist. For those of you who do not know what an interventional cardiologist or who an interventional cardiologist is that it's a specialty within a specialty that, people like myself, we are the likes who do procedures to the heart in terms of opening up of blockages, valves and that kind of stuff. So it's unusual for someone like myself to do community events like this, because my entire training, my career, my practice is all of my work is almost always is in the deep, dark dungeons of a lead-shielded cardiac cath lab. And on a weekend like this, most interventional cardiologists, I live in Florida. It's a beautiful day out. I should be on a golf course. What am I doing here on a locked up in a Zoom call? Pretty much in a way asking the community to do a few things right, so you make someone like myself potentially go jobless. As to how I did that, how did I come to that type of a transformation in my career, at the request of American College of Lifestyle Medicine, I wrote a narrative essay. It's a free access. You don't have to be a member of any organization to access this. You can just type American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I have a carrot and a stent, you pick. You can read my kind of my philosophy behind as to how did I get here. And I'm also now the crazy one who walks around the hospital wearing a Scrubs t-shirt that reads this. That phrase, I put it under my name, not necessarily because a stent is a carrot is a replacement for a stent, but it's more of a conversation starter, more of a just to show my patients, my friends, and my family my current philosophy as to how I look at disease and how I try to treat and prevent disease. And but I want to start the discussion with a couple of quick questions. Why are we meeting here? If you really look at the fundamental reason as to why we meet, through groups like this, even in the middle of a pandemic, we're trying to make these connections through some of the technology that we have at our disposal. The main reason is we all want to be healthy. And believe it or not, the reason I do this, in addition to trying to get the message out, to me this is very therapeutic, in the sense that this gives me, talking to the community about preventive tools, gives me an amazing joy, a personal and professional gratification, and a life lived with a sense of purpose, which we will talk down the discussion in itself has health outcomes data. So, but another question that we seldom ask is that, what actually is health? And it turns out the World Health Organization has a definition for this. Many years ago, I believe this was put forth in the 70s, that health is not just the mere absence of disease or infirmity, but it is the total presence of social, physical, emotional, and you may even go on to add spiritual well-being, right? That's what health is all about. But one of the things that I want to make a distinction, and all of you to think about this almost on a daily basis, that there is a clear distinction between health promotion and disease management. And this is what I was, caught in between about 5-6 years ago, because to become an interventional cardiologist, it's about 16, some places 17 years of uninterrupted medical training or uninterrupted education, I should say, after you finish high school, to complete your interventional cardiology training. And when you do that and you go into practice and, put 10 years into my practice, it hit me one day that majority of what I do is managing disease. Almost, actually, not even majority, almost all of what I do is managing disease. And that just did not sit well with me. That I spent 17, 16 years after high school training, and then I had 10 years of experience, and all that I'm doing is putting band-aids on people. And I seldom get an opportunity to involve myself in maintaining people's health. And that's my professional way of kind of doing a deep sense of introspection. From a society point of view, you all should be asking the same question, because when you come to a doctor like myself or a any doctor who's increasing your blood pressure medication, who's telling you to start insulin for diabetes, who's telling you that you need a toe amputation, or who's telling you that you need to go for dialysis or have an open heart operation, fancy, phenomenally advanced, technologies. But all of that is managing disease. None of that is actually maintaining your health. And so I really want you to kind of, take this message home, is that, where am I in relation to my disease being managed versus me being an active participant in maintaining my own health, right? Turns out health actually is an inside job. And for discussions such as this, you can literally take the word healthy and break it apart into heal thyself, meaning that majority of health is in our hands. And majority of disease, like, is in my hands. And it turns out, in terms of personal responsibility, health being an inside job and also being a good component of that is personal responsibility. But Chicago Tribune wrote this in 1975, that the idea of preventive medicine is faintly un-American. It means first recognizing that the enemy is us. Very strong words. Unfortunately, the way I see the world, more applicable today than they were in 1975. And the way I interpret this is, when we say the enemy is us, not necessarily to shame someone or blame someone who is suffering with XYZ disease burden, but there is that component of personal responsibility that we have to actively think about and assume. And a deeper question is that once we come to that assumption that we are extremely responsible for our own health, the next question is, why do we want to be healthy? Right? I'm just think as I speak now, just think for a second, like, how many of you actually took the time and asked this question for yourself, or had this type of conversation with your own friends, family, and your loved ones? And when we ask those questions, there are two reasons that come up. No matter how detailed and how descriptive our answers may be, and no matter how culturally diverse, linguistically different we are, all of our answers will fall into only two categories. There's no third answer to that question. There are only two answers as to why we want to be healthy, because we want quality of life, and we want quantity of life, also known as longevity, meaning that we want to live as long as possible and while maintaining as high of a quality as possible. Although here on this slide that I'm showing these two as two separate boxes and two separate entities, we all know that they are inseparable. Quality and quantity of life are intertwined, are interlinked like the sides of a coin. And what I would like to do in the next slide, maybe spend a couple of minutes, make a sincere attempt to take you through a century's worth of human journey in this country, using nothing but those two metrics, quality of life and the quantity of life. Let's go back to 1920. Exactly 100 years ago, an average person in America died at the age of 45. As shocking as you may find it, that was the average life expectancy in 1920. And during those short years of 45 years of life, most people suffered significantly, and the quality of life went down rapidly, because they did not have access to pretty much anything and everything that we take. At least most people back in the 20s did not have access to majority of the things that we take for granted, like clean running water, public sanitation, antibiotics, vaccination, food that is well regulated, access to a primary care doctor, which unfortunately is still an issue for a lot of people. But in 2020, exactly 100 years later, we have made tremendous progress, not just in this country, pretty much across every country, even in some of the poorest of poor nations, people are living almost, if not close to, double the average age they lived a century ago. But unfortunately, if you go back a second here, back in 1920, the life's shape looked like a triangle. Today, while we are living longer, our shapes looks like this, a bizarre convoluted shape. Because early on, very early on, as early as 10 to 15 years of age, children are gaining weight. And sadly, we are now diagnosing children with type 2 diabetes. By the time people are 40, 45, men are complaining about sexual dysfunction, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, not to mention the psychological and social stressors. And as a consequence of all of that, every common chronic diseases are piling up like we have never seen before. Yes, we are living longer, but we are also dying longer. How longer, you may ask me? How longer are we dying? There's a metric called DALY, disability adjusted loss of years, meaning while you're living longer, how many years are you losing due to some sort of a disability? That is, in America, is about 24 years, almost quarter of a century. And we see this in our lives. We know people in our lives, but as a physician, I see that every single day. People are alive, they're in their 70s, but when you ask them, when was the last time you walked a mile? People really say it's been years. But what I argue is that given that we no longer die of two things that killed us for almost all of our existence, that is infection and lack of food, right? Most people no longer die, not infection is there's an exception, we're going to talk about that in a second. Right? Infection is no longer the leading cause of death. Lack of food is no longer the leading cause of death. So we have pretty much good control on those two. And yet we are dying of diseases that should not even exist for the most part. But if we only paid attention to it, is it not remotely possible that our life should look like that? That we live to be 100, I just randomly picked a number, then when it's our time, we drop. So compared to 1920, where the life looked like a triangle, the life in 2020, we have all the opportunities and the means to make our lives look like a box. And that, right? Because that concept by social anthropologists is called the concept of living longer and dying shorter and making an effort to make our life's graph look like a box. Because no matter how hard we try, we will all end up in a box one day. We just don't want to be the cause of it. And how bad is the problem? You know, if I were to ask you, in general, in American society, turns out that 80% of us after age 65 are burdened with at least one preventable common chronic disease. And 68% with two common preventable chronic diseases. That's the current burden. And the only time the leading cause of disease was not heart disease happened twice in the past 100 years. Once in 1918, when the leading cause of death in America was the flu pandemic, and now in 2020, the leading cause of death became COVID. Except those 2 years for the past century, despite all of our advances, yes, we have made tremendous progress, phenomenal technology, phenomenal strategies, but except for the last year and 2019-18, the leading causes were heart disease. So American Heart Association came up with a fascinating concept called Life's Simple 7, how to get the message to the public, right? Eat healthy, keep an ideal body weight, exercise regularly, don't smoke, keep your blood pressure, cholesterol, and sugars under control. If you do this, extremely likely that you're going to significantly lower the risk of your heart disease. Beautiful public health campaign. Many years have gone by, And while we're just beginning to see some change, unfortunately, starting about 10, 12 years ago, despite all of our efforts, heart disease did not go down as predicted. Instead, it started ticking up. The red line that you see. The dotted red line was the predicted path. For the first time in recorded history, heart disease was going to be the number 2 cause of death. But unfortunately, the numbers are going up. The question is why? Right? Why is that? This is an interesting article written in the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago that heart attack, 49-year-old, right? At 49, this man died at 49, leaving behind a beautiful family. And there's an entire write-up about this, about how younger people, women, non-smokers, right, just becoming victims to a disease that is preventable. And primarily due to skyrocketing epidemics of obesity and diabetes, right? And despite that, we talk a lot in America about war and terrorism and war on that, war on this. But no, we rarely hear what is the biggest thing. The biggest problem is this. This is the number of people that we lose due to heart disease alone. But all that we hear about is terrorism and war on many things. But we rarely hear a public and a societal and a policy chatter about war on preventable diseases, right? That is clearly reflective. So this is the blue shade here. This is the number of heart disease deaths. And if you go to Google searches and print media, you rarely see any of that conversation happening, right? So that is the society's perspective. How about us, people like myself, cardiologists, right? So a beautiful survey was done by one of my colleagues, Dr. Monica Agarwal. 930 cardiologists were surveyed, and 90% reported that we don't receive any training on nutrition during our countless number of years of training in medicine. Very little training. Yet, despite not getting that training, majority of us agreed that nutrition is important. Not only did we agree that nutrition is important, we also said that it is our responsibility to talk about nutrition to our patients, right? So look at this. So most of us said we don't receive enough training. Most of us said it is extremely important and it is our responsibility to talk about nutrition to our patients, right? So far, beautiful. But turns out, are we being the change that we want to bring to the world? Are we being the change that we want to bring to our patients? Unfortunately, only 30%, not even 30% of cardiologists and cardiovascular specialists admitted that they are consuming the bare minimum recommended servings of fruits and vegetables a day. So as a consequence of the society not paying attention to it and the medical professionals not paying attention to the preventable nature of all these diseases, now we have become a country where close to 80%, almost 80% of us are either overweight or obese. And all of this happened in a very short time. And the numbers just keep going up every single year. It's just never a downward trend in these numbers. And look at this. I just really want to spend this time on this one thing. If you really look at the cardiovascular risk factors amongst our children or young, I should say youth, ages between 12 to 19, the signal for healthy diet score, folks, this is American Heart Association statistics, including 2021, they look identical, that the signal for healthy diet score amongst America's youth, 12 to 19, is statistically undetectable. It is listed officially as a 0.0. I've been tracking this graph for many, many years. It looks identical every year without a single pixel of green showing healthy diet score. Children, that's the best time. They provide us with a window of opportunity, the widest window of opportunity to promote health. So please, please pay attention to what your children are eating, because the health ramifications are genetically multi-generational. Because that's the window of opportunity, ages 5 to 25, even sooner. I actually tell people, when is a good time to start healthy eating or healthy living? I came up with 2 phrases. womb to tomb or lust to dust. That's the way it should be. Because that's where you get the most benefit. Look at the amount of benefit and the cost is very low. Instead, we have a system we start thinking about in our 60s and 70s where there is very little you can do because a lot of disease has advanced and the correcting it comes with an extreme high cost. And where is that cost going? It turns out majority of the cost is going towards chronic medical conditions that are preventable. And despite outspending majority of the countries, we are not seen on the top 20 healthy countries on the planet. Bloomberg does this list every year. And if you really look at what is shocking is that who are the professionals who are making some money out of this, right? In America, the least paid of healthcare professionals are the people who matter the most. Our public health officials, our primary care doctors, and our pediatricians. These are the maintainers of health. These are not managers of disease. And yet we built a structure, we built a system and a society that rewards them the least. I should not be doing this presentation, folks. I'm an interventional cardiologist. I'm the guy who's waiting in the cardiac cath lab with a catheter and a stent to help you, God forbid, when everything fails and you're experiencing a heart attack. I should not be doing this. A county public official should be doing this. A primary care doctor should be empowered to do this. A pediatrician should be empowered to talk about this, and they should be officially rewarded for doing it, and so should be our policies be built. Instead, when we did not pay attention to all of this, and as a consequence, we now have a system of a healthcare system, we call it ignorantly, because it is not a healthcare system, because it doesn't care for the health of the people. Take a look at the pyramid. The entire money, entire investment, entire systems are built towards tertiary care. When was the last time you heard a message of health promotion from your local county or state public health officials, except in the middle of a catastrophic disaster? Well, this is the biggest of disasters and we are not paying attention to it. So what we all have to do, because it affects us at every level, professional and personal level. So what I am pleading all of us to do is to do our part, to lend a forceful and a powerful hand to flip this pyramid back onto its base, where we actually care as a society at all levels, personal and professional levels. We actually care for the health of the society, not so much get focused on disease management. The question is, how do we do that? How do we go about doing it? Concept number one is we have to be acutely mindful of it. Mindful of what, you may ask me? Mindful of, when I asked you earlier, why do you want to be healthy? All of you came up with an answer. And that answer is never. And I asked this question to my patients thousands of times so far now. Not a single patient said to me, why do you want to be, when I asked them, why do you want to be healthy? That, hey, Dr. Reddy, I want to be healthy because I want to come back to your cardiac cath lab. Somehow that's never the answer. The answers are consistently, I want to see my child graduate. I want to attend my granddaughter's wedding. I want to go on that cruise vacation ship. I want to learn how to play an instrument. I want to run a 5K. I want to learn how to sing. I want to read X number of books. Right? Are we being mindful? When those answers come, right? Are we, and right? But this is the situation that nobody is happy about being burdened with 5 chronic conditions and taking enough pills to put them in a bowl and eat for breakfast, right? And everybody's complaining about it. But are you being mindful? And this is what I mean by, are we holding ourselves personally accountable instead of blaming the system, instead of blaming the pharmaceuticals? Because we are the system, right? So what can we do about it, right? Turns out that I don't have a magic pill. I'm not here to sell you a product. I'm not here to sell a book. I'm not here to sell you a DVD. I'm not here to sell you a membership in my club. But here, I am here to sell you the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, 5 of which, for almost all practical purposes, are free, except for having to pay a little for the food that we eat. Right? And the concept of mindfulness is not something, I'm not expecting everybody to, when I say mindfulness, the kind of mindfulness I'm talking about is not the kind where I'm not expecting you to go home, do something and show up in my clinic next week with a halo behind your head and a rosary in your hands. Although that could work for some people. But the concept that I'm talking about is that if you were to listen to a discussion like this and go home and you know what, this makes a lot of sense. I'm going to completely clean up my mess, for lack of better words, from Monday or whatever. Always start with the beginner's mind. Assume that you really don't know because we haven't done something like this because we are used to a certain way of living, a certain way of eating, a certain way of sleeping, a certain way of being physically active. And then you want to change a lifetime worth of habits, it's going to be difficult. The best way to do it is just start as if, you know what, I don't know anything about it. I'm going to learn and I'm going to build. And be non-judgmental about it. Non-judgmental about the message, non-judgmental about the messenger and the whole process. And be patient because sometimes it does take time. And sometimes you can see this happen in a matter of few days. And then be very accepting of failures because we are all going to fail. At some point in time or the other, we are all going to fail when we're trying to learn some new concepts. And be non-striving. Do not look about bringing lifestyle changes as some kind of a competition with your neighbor. And trust yourself, trust your professionals, and seek appropriate information. And when you fail, when it hurts, just let it go. Let it go and start new. And this is actually one of my favorite slides in this presentation, is that when you try to make changes, please be aware and make sure that you make those changes that are measurable, meaning that tiny little baby steps. And no matter where you are, if you want to get better, strive to be 1/100th better tomorrow than you are today. And if you stick to that one simple rule, before you know, by the end of the year, you're actually 37 points higher than where you started. As simple as that. Math always works. We just have to be consistent about it. Another way of looking at it is, let's say, you know what, I want you to get to perfect health or perfect anything that you want to accomplish in your life and get up the mountain and touch that cloud. But to get there, I'm going to make it easy for you. I'm going to give you 2 ladders. Pick one. One of them has steps 3 feet apart. Other one has steps 10 feet apart. Which one would you pick? The one with the baby steps, right? That's how it works. So it's doable. All of these lifestyle changes are doable. And then when you do fail, the best way to cope up with this is these 2 beautiful quotes. One is, the master has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. Always works. And I see this in my own profession as to how skillfully some of the masters do some of the procedures. And that goes, again, there's a nice segue to think about life in such a way that if we are what we repeatedly do, if we become what we repeatedly do, excellence then is a gift. Excellence then is a habit, not a gift. So the tools, right? I showed this slide earlier. What are the tools that we have? The tools that we have are these pillars. But the question is there scientific evidence to support this? Right? We're going to go through each one of the pillars and show where is the evidence to live a healthy life using the pillars of lifestyle medicine. The first and the foremost pillar of lifestyle medicine, should anybody succeed, is to have a strong social support. Just like this group that Harriet has put together and has invited me. Through this common cause, a bunch of people have come together. There is a community. Even in the middle of a pandemic, we're trying to connect with each other because it is evolutionary. Humans are social beings. There is no discussion about it because nobody succeeds in isolation. We only suffer in isolation. And the data on this is very, very clear, both here in the US and also obviously from Blue Zones, that this beautiful study clearly showed from a lead author, phenomenally gifted researcher in this area about social relationship. What she clearly showed is that people who live with a sense of connectivity, a social connectivity, have a 50% increased likelihood of long-term survival. And that's what people don't realize, is that assuming that you're doing few other things right, the best odds of living to 100 are provided not by some crazy things, but it is living lives with a sense of connectivity and living lives with a sense of purpose. But unfortunately, 43%, almost near to half of seniors in America, are currently admitting to being socially isolated. right? And this is right out of the CDC's page. Unbeknownst to most people, social isolation, the risk of having a heart attack or a stroke from social isolation is identical to that of a person smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Right? So now, speaking of cigarettes, do I still need to talk about cigarettes in 2020? Absolutely, yes. For many reasons, right? There used to be a time in this country, not too long ago, there are people still alive who witnessed this, that cigarettes were advertised in medical journals to a point of telling pregnant women to smoke for the health of the baby and health of the woman. So if you want to take a deep dive into, because it is important, because some of the tactics used by the tobacco industry are currently being used by the American food industry. To get a feel for that, if you want to read a book, I strongly suggest this book. It's called The Cigarette, A Political History. Fascinating read. And there is really no end as to which part of the body smoking does not affect. And it's important. The reason I put it here is because not too long ago, just 4 or 5 years before I came to America, America was debating whether we should ban smoking on a commercial airline or not. It was only in 1990, February 25th, that US decided to officially ban tobacco smoking on inside of a commercial airline. Thinking, alcohol, people say drink responsibly, but this guy jokes around saying that drinking responsibly means don't spill it, right? And the burden is across the world in terms of loss of years is huge due to alcohol. But please note, if you want to drink alcohol, drink it because it gives you some joy. Drink it because you enjoy the company of your friends. Drink it because it's a holiday season. But please do yourself a favor. Don't drink thinking that it is good for you. Because alcohol is officially listed as a group 1 carcinogen by every single medical agency. So I never really saw the logic behind telling people to consume a group 1 carcinogen in moderation. Right? So be very careful with it. Emotional stress. Emotional stress is directly linked to various components of cardiovascular issues. And again, including myself up until recently, I was not paying much attention to this when I talked to my patients. Now, this is actually one of the first and foremost things I spend a lot of time talking to my patients. Their social situation, their emotional burden, how they are handling stress. All of this has a directly central nervous system mediated effect on almost every component of cardiac function. Increased heart rate, increased tone on the blood vessels, increased risk of rupture of plaque inside of the blood vessels, increased risk of stroke, increased risk of heart attack. All of those are linked. But I'm going to skip this too. And here is the stress imposed by socioeconomic situations, lower income, higher crime, people who live in lower income neighborhoods, people who live in higher crime areas have significantly higher cardiovascular events, so much so that affects their life expectancy. Right? The next one is exercise. So this guy, look at him. He says somebody told him that to spend a little bit more time on the treadmill, and that's what he's doing. Right? But most people are not either. So we may laugh at somebody like that, but turns out very few people in America meet the bare minimum exercise recommendations. And it's actually getting worse. And the current recommendation is that we want people to at least moderate just going for a brisk walk. 30 minutes a day, at least 5 times a week. And if you want to do vigorous activity, going for a run, that at least be 75 minutes. In the middle, as simple as push, pull, lunge, and squat. No gym memberships, even if that's all you can do. Simple body weight physical activity, at least 2 to 3 times a week. On top of, and also there's something called as NEAT. I don't have a slide on this, it just hit my head. There's something called as NEAT. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis, meaning that how can you burn fat without a scheduled activity? That just try to stay active, try to stand up as frequently as you can. Walk far away from your place of work, right? And just, sometimes even a few blocks, half a mile, come back and be there before you know you walked a mile. Take flights of stairs as much as you can. Right? And I should make a slide out of it. Almost on a daily basis, if I look at my watch at the end of the day, I usually climb about 30 flights of stairs. And turns out that if people who already have heart disease and have some limitations, please consult your doctor and consult your cardiac rehab teams. But the beauty with that is that in people with existing heart disease, just even 15 to 20 minutes a day of walking has significant benefit. Now the big one, nutrition, right? Everybody wants to talk about it. So much so that there's a culture of diet wars. And during a discussion about a couple of years ago, I said this and it kind of stuck, which is while the keto, because everybody knows keto is very popular, and phyto as in plants, right? While the keto and the phyto are fighting the battle, the Cheeto as in processed food is winning the war, right? I said this and I kind of, made a slide out of it because one of the fundamental things I want to talk about food is that everybody thinks about food. When I say food, majority of the people in this country or across the world are fixated on don't eat fat, don't eat carbs, don't eat too much protein, or you're eating too little protein. But think about it. When was the last time any one of you went shopping and said to yourself that today I'm going to buy 6 carbs, 8 fats, and 9 proteins? Does anybody shop like that? Has anybody ever seen a grocery store anywhere in the world? There's a protein aisle, there's a fat aisle, or there's a carbohydrate aisle. So the industry doesn't sell it that way. Our shopping list never read that list, and yet we always think that way. Why is that? How did we come to be such a confusion that most people in this country are thinking about food as molecules? And that's where the industry borrowed a leaf from the tobacco industry, which is confusion is our best weapon. And everybody's confused. The bottom line is stop eating processed junk. This is a beautiful paper from a couple of years ago, 2019, from the National Institute of Health, Kevin Hall's paper, that clearly shows that processed food has health-related outcome issues, right? And turns out from 1990 to 2019, right? And I'm a cardiologist. And this is the leading cause of cardiovascular disease burden is high blood pressure and a poor diet. Right? There's only one condition that kills more people on the planet than smoking. That is high blood pressure. That's how common high blood pressure is. And billions of dollars have been spent on this. But turns out, think about this, right? It is the #1 cause of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality, high blood pressure. And if you invent a new medication and take it to the FDA's requirement to allow you to sell the medication is 3 millimeter drop. Just a 3-point drop in your blood pressure allows the FDA to sign off and say approved. While a DASH diet, which is not even 100% plant-based diet, but it is predominantly a plant-based diet with low salt or salt restriction, can drop your blood pressure by 20 to 25 millimeters within 30 to 40 days of compliance. And yet, after 33 years of being in medicine, I've never seen a broccoli rep come by my office or my hospital. And the DASH diet made it to the guidelines. It's a class 1 indication, meaning that this is the best approach to get rid of the #1 causer, #1 source of cardiovascular disease burden. Same is true for high cholesterol. So much so that there is a clear statement from many research papers clearly showing that especially in people who have never had a heart attack, predominantly a plant-based diet can be used as an alternative for pharmacological therapy. So much so that the 2019, the most active guidelines for keeping cholesterol and lipids down, healthy lifestyle with predominantly a plant-based diet is at the very top of the guidelines. Same is true for diabetes, right? Majority, the phenomenon, these three research papers that I put here are extremely well done and highly valued research papers. And based on that, the guidelines have changed, clearly showing that the dietary approach that is predominantly plant-based is beneficial to prevent, treat, and potentially even reverse diabetes. Right? And the Diabetes American Association of Clinical Endocrinology, they actually go out even further, telling that lifestyle therapy begins with nutrition. All patients should primarily be treated with a plant-based meal plan. And Life Without Diabetes is a phenomenal book. If there's one book, please read this book. And same thing, prevention guidelines clearly tell us to eat predominantly a plant-based diet. The guidelines clearly tell us to prevent cardiovascular events. The best way to do it is to use predominantly a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, lentils, legumes, and beans, and nuts, and seeds. Right? But there's a distinction. Plant-based necessarily doesn't mean it's healthy, because French fries are plant-based, Oreos or cookies are plant-based, and sodas are plant-based. And now this new trend of, plant-based burgers, be very careful with them, because they are also very processed. They're very high in salt load. And we have beautiful research showing that processed plant-based foods can be actually more dangerous. Right? And when we talk about this, the world thinks that, oh, these guys eat like this. But you all know that. But using very simple ingredients like this, we can make meals like this. Right? But again, no matter how much I read about nutrition, I keep coming back to these two sentences. I love this. One by Jeff Novick saying, don't eat crap, as in calorie-rich and processed food. And Michael Pollan, some of you may know him, summarized all of nutrition into 7 simple words. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. So this is a plate put forth by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, that our plate should look like this. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, doesn't matter. It's food. Next one is sleep. Nobody said it better than what Gandhi said. Each night when I go to sleep, I die. And the next morning when I wake up, I am reborn. Look at this, 7 to 8 hours. 7 to 8 hours, every single disease that you can think of is at its lowest point among people who are sleeping at least 7 to 8 hours. Not only the duration of sleep, but keep it interrupted, keep it uninterrupted. Same thing for diabetes, same thing for cancers. 7 to 8 hours of sleep is non-negotiable. Nutrition is negotiable. Negotiating with sleep is like negotiating with evolution. It's negotiating with time. We will never win. So few simple tips is pick a consistent time, keep the bedrooms dark, slightly on the cooler side, make it a relaxing environment, and no electronic devices. But something that is very practical is avoid large meals, avoid caffeine, and avoid alcohol for at least 4 to 6 hours before your designated bedtime. And try to exercise during the day, so come in bedtime, you're physically tired. A beautiful and a very resourceful and a very useful website for public education is sleepeducation.org. I strongly, if anybody's struggling, look this up and talk to your doctor. And after all of this, some of us said this ourselves, your doctor said this to you, a lot of families say this, doc, I hear you. I know what you're trying to tell me, but this damn disease runs in my family and there's nothing I can do about it. So to convey this, I borrowed the words of a man who said, there are no old men in my family. Everybody's life has been cut short by cardiovascular disease. And he asked the people in that room that day that the power is on us, had a duty to change that. And those were the words by the 2017 president of American Heart Association, who at age 49 had a massive heart attack a day after he said these words. On the floor of the American Heart Association national meeting, the president of AHA had a massive heart attack, had to be shocked and airlifted. And he said, this is a genetic condition. But turns out, we know from these 3 large data sets that if you maintain a healthy lifestyle by not smoking, maintaining an ideal body weight, being physically active, and eating healthy, very simple metrics, even in the setting of a high genetic risk. This is what blows people's mind, that even in the setting of a high genetic risk, if you maintain a healthy lifestyle, you can lower the risk of cardiovascular events by 50 to 60%. And that's what makes me say a healthy lifestyle is the best form of revenge, because it lowers the odds of any chronic disease by 78%, diabetes by 93%, heart attack by 81%, stroke by 50%, and cancers by almost 40%. But there is a but. Trust me. Despite this convincing data, there is an extremely important component we as a society continue to ignore. That is the moral and the social determinants of health. Take a look at these maps, folks. That's the obesity map for whites in America. That's the obesity map for Hispanics in America. And that's the obesity map for Blacks in America. We have 3 different Americas when it comes to obesity. And I strongly urge any one of you who is interested in this topic, Brand is about 6 months old, open access, just Google this, you will have access to the entire article. You don't have to be a paid subscriber. The moral determinants of health. Because except for few clinical preventive services that we do, most hospitals and physicians' offices are now become repair shops, trying to correct the social determinants of health. Right? What are those social determinants of health? Conditions of birth and conditions of early childhood, conditions of our education, conditions of our work, conditions of our elders in our lives and in our families. Who is caring for them? How much stress is that putting you on? And the community resilience, access to transportation, access to food. Yeah, I talk about it, but a lot of people don't have a grocery store nearby. Right? And they're afraid of being shot at just to go out to get food. And the fairness in the society. All of these are impact. Unless we address these issues head on, nothing else I said earlier is going to matter. Because we live in a country which we proudly call the financial capital of the world. You take a subway train from Midtown Manhattan and go to South Bronx. By the time you finish that train ride, there's a 10-year decline in life expectancy, which is 6 months for every minute spent on the train. Unless we address that, nothing is going to work, because that's an issue that can no longer wait. So thank you. I want to stop here. And we do this on behalf of our, just like Harriet has one. I founded this nonprofit organization, and pblm.org, that's our website. And if you see the value in what I'm doing and what my team is doing, just visit us and support us in any way you can. And if you want to reach me, I'm fairly active on Twitter. That's my handle, my full name, Koushik Reddy, MD. And that's my email if you want to send me or have myself or some other doctors talk on behalf of our organization. I'll be more than happy to do it. So I'll stop here and take any questions. Sorry, I think I went a little longer than planned.
Oh, no, you're perfectly fine. Like I say, I think most people were I know everyone was very interested in the information and what have you. So no worries, Dr. Reddy, about exceeding, your time. I'm here as long as people want to be here. If I do want to be considerate of your time. So I know I have, some comments and questions, but I'd like to defer to folks who have joined us and other folks, participants, to you can either raise if you're either through chat, or if you want to activate your video and raise your hand and ask a question. So who would like to be the first to ask Dr. Reddy a question? Michael Smith. Well, unmute yourself, Michael. Okay.
Hello, Dr. Reddy.
Hi.
And thank you for this great presentation, and Harriet for putting it on. I have a question that is really a question I think that you may not have an answer to, because I think that is how do we get more people aware of this? I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to give this presentation to us. And I would love to see this going out to 2 million people instead of the 20, 30 of us that are online here. This is such important information. I recently started a company called the Healthy ICU for helping people to get healthy fast, teaching the same type of information after losing a brother at 52 to a heart attack, and going plant-based. I dropped my cholesterol from 263 to 136, my inflammation markers by 88%. I mean, all the things that you talk about. And is it political? Is it? I mean, how do we make healthy sexy?
It's hard, it's, again, a lot of this is also financial determinants of health, is that, I work for the VA, so I don't see any of this as a financial thing. But in terms of how to get this out without involving, am I going to be able to change the entire paradigm of American thinking? The answer is no. But at the same time, what gives me hope is that we also live in a society and a world where cat videos are being shared 3 million times. Right? So, but if we all come together and hey, you know what? Just keep on talking about it. It's going to be rough. It's going to be difficult. But I'm a firm believer that as long as we are not doing any fraudulent activity and we truly, passionately believe, based on science and evidence, every work such as this has to go through 3 phases. The age-old saying, that is ridicule, opposition, and acceptance. But it's going to take time. But luckily, from my end, it's actually, the way I see it as a physician, it's actually happening little faster. I'm very happy about it, because now there's a brand new society called American Society of Preventive Cardiology, not even 2 years old, and so it's the pendulum is swinging. Gradually, the pendulum is swinging, and but yeah, and the best way I know how to do this is I'm a member at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And believe it or not, for the past 3 to 4 years, it is the fastest growing medical organization on the planet. So that is very telling. So the message is actually getting out. So please don't be discouraged, and I admire your passion to starting your own organization to get the word out. But let's all be positive about it. Let's all be positive about it. It's going to be difficult. But my mind of operation always is that only the dead fish go with the flow. Where's the fun in doing the easy stuff?
Nice. Your presentation is very entertaining and engaging. It's excellent. Excellent
feedback. Thank you for the question. Thank you.
And I had a question about the presentation being available. So yes, so I'll edit this video, but I hope to send it out to folks in the next 2 or 3 days, and I'm going to put it on, and I'll put it also in the email that I'm working on, perhaps having Salt Lake Thrive have a website, but I'll put on the Facebook page, but it'll be email the presentation to everyone who registered for this event, whether they were actually able to join us live or not. And let's see, Petra, have you raised your hand? Do you have a question? Petra? I thought I saw where she had raised her hand. Well, Dr. Reddy, just so many things that you said, and other folks may have some questions or comments, but just really resonated with me. I have a relative, the father of a relative by marriage, and he's a veteran in Vietnam, and he is having some health issues, including having to have a catheter. But I heard recently that his doctors, because he needs to gain and maintain weight, his doctors had recommended that he eat bacon. When I heard that, I was like, oh, no, but I think, you were talking earlier about how little nutrition education there is among doctors and what have you. And I think just the general lack of I'm sorry, there goes my dog, but the general lack of awareness, people don't know to ask, their physician. And also one thing that was very frustrating for me, and perhaps some others as well, when we were having the Democratic debates way back in 2019 or 2020, we heard a lot of talk about healthcare and how there's been billions allocate $1 billion of healthcare. But there was very little, if no mention of prevention, and all that discussion during those debates and other forums. No one talks about prevention. So I think you said, like you said, just, awareness building is a huge part of it.
Well, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. There are a lot of financial forces, because it's like you said, it's a $3.5 trillion, industry, for lack of better words, every year. That's the the total budget, but a good chunk of that goes to healthcare, and but we're not getting the the bang for the buck, because so many people are suffering, so many people premature death, and mostly due to preventable diseases, including cancer. I talked a lot about heart disease, but same thing with cancer. The vast majority of common cancers are preventable just by doing 3 things: no alcohol, no smoking, and maintaining an ideal body weight. Those 3 things will actually prevent majority of the cancer burden. And yet, we rarely hear that, because we really don't want to, like I said in my things, we the best way to kind of swing or flip that pyramid is to empower our public health officials. Really, you know, we have departments of health at the county level, at the state level, but they are so underfunded. And they are the ones, you know, imagine that they are given the power. And as we up and down, whatever street in whatever town, country in America, is that instead of seeing these billboards for fast foods and junk food and liposuction, that we see actually new billboards put out by the public, you know, county health officials, because we funded them. That Americans actually start seeing billboards for healthy eating, billboards for walking, and it changes, because we did this once. We did this with smoking. So it's not, but it took enormous amount of, right? A lot of people don't know this, that the first meeting when smoking was declared officially injurious to human health, the Surgeon General had to lock the federal building from inside with federal agents guarding the building in the front. That's what it took to send the message that smoking is injurious to health in America. So, but if you have that political will and funding to send the money into the right places, it can be done. We need to channel that money in the right way. But, you know, as to how long it's going to take, I don't know. But we should all at least do this, because we can take one simple logic to our graves, that when we saw this happening in our lifetimes, we did not sit on the sidelines. We tried.
And I'm going to ask you another question, Dr. Reddy. I had to leave for just 1 second. When someone is one of your patients, or someone that you're treating, what have you, and they perhaps are overweight and they're smoking, what have you, and for some folks, it just must seem impossible to make these changes, I would ask, what's typically the number one thing or first thing that simple thing that you would advise someone to do to be able to start their transformation, their journey?
So what I do at the Tampa VA hospital, I run 2 lifestyle medicine clinic every Friday afternoon. One of them is called the HEAL Clinic, HEAL, stands for Healthy Eating and Living. It's a one-time offering. It's an introductory clinic. So fundamental question I ask is that, look, before I talk to you about sleep, stress management, eating healthy, and, you know, walking XYZ and strong social relationships, are you a smoker? If you're smoking, I said, you know what, not that I'm trying to kick you out of my program, but I'd rather have you spend this time with a smoking cessation counselor. That's fun. You know, if in 2021, if you're still smoking and trying to go on a plant-based diet and exercise, yeah, it may help, but in a bigger picture, that's my fundamental thing, is that if you have this much of bandwidth from an emotional resilience, social support, you know, medical support, have that all channeled into smoking cessation. And after smoking cessation is done, the next one, and then we have a 6-week program called the CALM program, CALM, stands for Comprehensive Approach to Lifestyle Medicine. The first week we spend on is social relationships, because we all need support, folks, right? I can't imagine anybody disagreeing with that. Like you said, the veteran, you know, the friend of yours or a family, if I'm talking to a 65-year-old, 70-year-old veteran who has seen combat in Vietnam, and he was set in his own ways, but he wants to make an effort to get better, right? I need to offer him support through the medical community and also through the society. So we spend a lot of time on building social relationships. Before COVID, what we used to do is ask them to go and play with a website called meetups.com, where they can go and put their zip code and look for, hey, is there a walking group in my community? Is there a plant-based group in my community that is meeting at a church, at a mosque, at a synagogue, or wherever, at a YMCA on a monthly basis, doing a potluck? And all of a sudden, you found your own community within your own zip code that you did not know existed. So because without those social supports, people fail. And once we do that, the next one I talk about is nutrition, because nutrition is something we can literally change the next meal. Can I build a perfect exercise program by dinner time tonight? No. But if I'm mindful about it, by dinner time, I can completely undo, if I choose to, my prior dietary habits. And then they actually have a consequence. Every meal, as most of you may know, every meal is an opportunity. So, and then we gradually build on it in terms of exercise, sleep, and then we complete a 6-week program. And it's been going on for 2 years, and we will soon, hopefully by mid-April to early May, we'll be publishing our outcomes data. But it's again, you know, if anybody's telling you that there is a super food, don't listen to them. There's no such a thing. We have to stick to patterns. We have to stick to patterns, and it's a package deal. None of this, exercise, sleep, eating healthy, social relationships, stress reduction, none of them exist in a silo, right? You all know that all of them are connected, and we have to approach them in a connected way. So again, kind of sorry if I gave you a long-winded answer, but that's the way I feel about it.
No, I appreciate it. And also like during your discussion, how you talk, you're talking about systems, a holistic approach, and how you talked about some of these healthy lifestyle factors. Not only are they beneficial for heart disease, but they're also beneficial, for cancer, obesity, diabetes, some of the others. So the body really is a system. So whether it's good for one part of our body, it makes sense that, it's really a holistic, comprehensive approach to health. And I'm going to ask you, Dr. Reddy, you mentioned the title of a book, and can you please repeat the title of that book that you recommended that everybody read?
Oh,
The Life of, I think it was something I can.
On diabetes, yeah, hold on. That's I have it on my desk somewhere. I'm just drawing a blank on the name.
Okay.
Hold for 1 second.
All right.
Yeah. It's called Life Without Diabetes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to check.
It's actually written by Roy Taylor. If you're a diabetic, I strongly suggest you read that book. It's a very, very useful book.
Okay.
Life Without Diabetes. Basically, he distills advanced science and his lifetime worth of research experience into a very palatable, for a non-medical person. So it's really well-written book.
So it sounds like it's very approachable. You mentioned you're having a social support network. So I know, Dr. Reddy, that's what I'm sure you do attempt to do with your own nonprofit. And that's what we try to do here at Salt Lake Thrive, and have a sense of community by continuing to do things online. And we will get together and continue with potlucks when we're able to do that, and then share resources. Because I think we're lucky in this day and age, there are so many resources out there to help folks get started. Like you pointed out, it's really one step at a time. You don't become a plant-based expert overnight, but just to show how truly simple it is, even just making substitutions with favorite meals. So I'm going to mention, and I'll just real quickly describe if someone else has a question for Dr. Reddy, that Salt Lake Thrive, we are going to be having our next event is on March 20th. It's called Spring into Fitness. I think it's the first day of spring. And we'll start at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So we're going to have two local plant-based doctors, Dr. Nikki Davis and Patrick Olson with Plant-Based Utah. They're going to touch on, I'm sure, some of the many topics, aspects that Dr. Reddy did, but how important healthy plant-rich nutrition is, and go a little bit further in detail about their aspects of plant-rich nutrition. We're going to, let's see, someone is not muted.
Yeah, there are a couple of people raised their hand. I think.
Oh, okay. All right, you bet. Okay. And I'll just finish real quickly. And so we'll have two doctors. We'll have a session on stress reduction and meditation, mindful meditation. We'll have a cooking demonstration, and then we'll also have a owner of a CrossFit gym to show and talk about healthy fitness. So I'll send a link to that. So let's see. So who has a question? Sharon, you have a question? Sure, go ahead.
I see it.
No, your question about where you point people to when they're beginning their journey, that was my question. So you already asked my question.
Okay. All right. And who else might have a question?
On the Zoom chat box, I see a couple of people digitally raising their hand.
Okay, ask Petra. She had a question. And I'm not seeing, who are you saying, Dr. Reddy? I'm not.
There was another person. I think that person now is offline.
Okay. All right. You only saw Petra with a raised hand. But, if anyone approaches me, Dr. Reddy, they do have my contact information, and they have a question after the event, and then I will, pass it along to you. So, let's see, we have a Dr. Reddy. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Reddy, and thank you everyone for joining us. Like I say, it's extremely important, and we'll do another event.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks again. Thanks for having me, and wish everyone best of health and joy, and stay safe.
And I will soon send out the Zoom link with this recording and information on the next Salt Lake Thrive event. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy.
Have a healthy weekend.
You're awesome. Thank you.